my brother, held his wedding in my hotel. He used services from my company, used my own money, and crossed my name off the guest list. I'm Madison Cole, 34 years old, owner of the luxury hotel chain Monarch Summit in Colorado. And that was the day I realized that even your own flesh and blood can be the one to stab you the deepest. If you've ever been cut out of the very life you poured yourself into, hit subscribe to Revenge Mark. We will not stay silent anymore. We tell our stories, and we stand up. I grew up with Evan, my brother, in a tiny rental house up in the hills north of Boulder. When our parents divorced, I was 12. He was 14. Evan was my whole world back then. He led me through the coldest days, secretly tucking breakfast into my bag when the only thing left in the house was a single slice of bread. He said, "No matter what happens, you're the one person I will never let go of." I believed him. Believed so much that, when he met Clarissa Bennett, a girl born with a silver spoon in her mouth, I was the first to congratulate him. Clarissa was beautiful, educated, and so rich I swore she must have been raised on caviar before she was even born. I used to believe as long as I'm kind, they'll accept me. When Evan said they were looking for a venue, I was the one who offered Monarch Summit Aspen, my mountaintop hotel. When Clarissa hesitated over the budget, I wired $54,000 straight to the front desk and executive chef as a wedding gift. No strings attached. Just the hope I'll be part of the most important day of my brother's life. That was before the truth shattered. One May afternoon, while I was reviewing the final menu for the wedding, my phone rang. The caller was Victoria, the wedding planner. Her voice was as cold as the first snow. "Ms. Cole, I've been instructed by the bride's family that your presence may cause discomfort. The guest list has been revised. I'm sorry, but you're no longer on it." I couldn't say a word. She continued, "However, the wedding will proceed at Monarch Summit as planned. The funds you transferred will remain as is. Thank you for your support." I had to brace myself against the table to stay upright. My ears rang. My heart didn't break. It was being squeezed from the inside. "Does Evan know about this?" I asked. Victoria hesitated before replying, "I've been told that. He agreed to it. My brother, the one who once hid me from Mom when I cried after being denied a scholarship, now, agreeing to let someone throw me out of his own wedding, I sat silently in my office. Outside, the sun poured gold over the Rockies. Inside, my whole body went cold. Clarissa didn't want me there because... Why? Because I was the hotel owner. Because I wouldn't fit the wedding photos. Because I didn't belong in their glittering world of champagne flutes and gold-plated business cards. I once believed that if I gave enough, loved deeply enough, I would be kept close. Now I know some people are born thinking you only have value if they still need something from you. But this time, they chose the wrong person to cut out. Because I'm not just the groom's sister. I own the place where that wedding is happening. And if they think I'll sit quietly while they erase me from the very dream I built, they've never seen Madison Cole strike back. That night, I came home late. The penthouse on the 6th floor of the Monarch Hotel overlooked the valley, glowing with golden lights. But not a single one was warm enough for my heart. I collapsed into the chair, still in my work clothes, shoes on, hair loose and messy at the nape of my neck, and tears, not yet fallen. I didn't know what emotion was running through me. Anger? Yes. But what made my chest ache was shame. The kind of quiet shame no one can see yet swallows you whole from the inside. Being stabbed in the back already hurts, but being stabbed by the very person you believed would protect you for life, that's something else entirely. I switched on the reading lamp. The soft, golden light revealed a silver-framed photo on the shelf across from me, an old picture. My short hair, worn-out t-shirt. Evan had his arms slung over my shoulder, head slightly tilted. Behind us was the small grocery store where we both worked part-time in high school. I remembered exactly the day that picture was taken. We had just bought a sandwich, splitting it in half because our weekly pay was just over $30 each. My brother laughed and said, "Maddie, someday you're going to have your own restaurant, and I'll rebuild Mom's dream house." Back then, dreams were just scribbles in a notebook, and we were just two children of divorce, always standing on the edge of someone else's happiness. Yet now, I own an entire hotel empire, and he's about to marry someone from the upper class, the kind who can make anyone feel not enough. And I'm the one who scraped my hands raw mixing cement for the lobby floors, who signed hundreds of permits, hired every chef, stood in the rain opening doors every Christmas Eve, now pushed aside like an extra number in their elegant equation. The next morning, I didn't go to the office. Not because I was weak, but because I was afraid that if anyone asked, "Are you okay?" I'd collapse right there in the lobby I built. I hid out on the third floor, the laundry room, a corner no one would think to find me. The smell of freshly washed towels and the steady hum of the spin cycle almost lulled me back to reality. A new staff member, named Jolie, happened to see me. "Ms. Cole, are you all right?" I gave a faint smile and shook my head. "I think I just need a little quiet." Jolie hesitated, then softly said, "Yesterday, I overheard some people in the kitchen talking about your brother's wedding. They didn't think you would be invited." I turned to her, my eyes starting to burn red. Neither did I. That afternoon, I forced myself back into the office. Emails piled up. Victoria had sent the updated guest list along with the seating chart. I opened the file. My name wasn't there. Not at the family table. Not at any table. I didn't know why I still hoped something would change. A message. An explanation. A belated pang of guilt from Evan. But nothing. Not a single word. Not a single call. Not a single text from the man I called my brother. That night, I walked around the hotel. Wedding season. Everyone was busy. The ballroom had new chandeliers installed, which were in line with Clarissa's taste. Italian fabric is still rolled up and waiting to be hung tomorrow. I stood silently at the doorway. One of the staff, Thomas, spotted me and grinned. "Madison, who are you sitting next to at the wedding? Got a VIP table yet?" I forced a smile. "Probably the invisible one." He laughed loudly, not getting the joke. I turned away, my throat tightening with bitterness. I walked down the long hallway where I had slept during the first nights of building this hotel, where there was no air conditioning and no bed. I passed the kitchen where I had washed dishes myself during opening week when the staff quit mid-shift. And now I'm the owner. I'm the one who pays the bills. Yet I have no seat at the dinner. No name on the list. No place. In the heart of the person I once called family. I went back to my room. I looked again at the old photo on the shelf. I whispered, as if asking myself, what did I do wrong? Evan. And there was only one answer. I believed you would never leave me behind. 3 days later, I still hadn't heard a thing from Evan. No text, no call, no explanation. That silence spoke louder than any words could. I still went to work as usual. Meetings, budget approvals, checking the wedding orders. The very wedding I had funded for the most part. I smiled at my staff, signed off on payroll, and posed for pictures with VIP guests. But deep inside, I felt like a glass already cracked from within, still standing, but one wrong touch could shatter me completely. On Wednesday morning, I overheard them talking about me in the elevator, Clarissa, along with 2 bridesmaids. They didn't see me standing in the corner, leaning against the wall, sunglasses and mask on. Does Madison really think she's part of the wedding? She just gave them the venue. Does she need to act like the mother of the groom? I swear, if she sticks her nose in one more time, I'll tell Victoria to change the entire service crew. I stood still, my hand gripping the strap of my bag. My eyes were fixed on the numbers on the control panel. 6th floor. The air felt colder. I stepped out without looking back. In my head, one question kept echoing over and over. Why do they think I'm not enough? I didn't need to be coddled. I didn't need public recognition. But to be pushed aside like I was just some piece of equipment, a temporary convenience, that was something I could not swallow. That night, I pulled up the original emails with Victoria, the wedding planner. I needed to understand when they had decided to cross my name off. And there it was, an email from 3 weeks ago. Subject line, regarding the guest list special request from the bride. In the CC field, Clarissa, Florence, her mother, and Evan. No one told me. No one asked me. From the very start, they had discussed removing me from the wedding photos, and I, the little sister who had covered 1/3 of the budget, wasn't even mentioned as family. I was referred to as the venue owner. I just sat there, staring at the screen. It felt like someone had poured a bucket of ice water straight into my chest. Then a quiet explosion went off inside me. Not big, not dramatic. Just a small crack, like the very first fracture on a pane of glass, opening the way for countless more that could never be undone. Evan had chosen Clarissa. Fine. But he hadn't just chosen that woman. He chose to treat his own sister as if she had never existed. I stood up and walked into the hotel's storage room. Inside was a wall-mounted safe. It held all the legal documents for Monarch Summit, the wedding contract, and the terms and conditions for using the venue. I opened it and flipped through the pages. Page 8. Clause 12. 3 Code of Ethics and Brand Representation Policy. Small print, cold and sharp. Monarch Summit reserves the right to cancel any event if it detects conduct that violates principles of respect, transparency, and honesty toward the owner. I placed my finger on that line. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't send an angry text. I just took a long, deep breath. If they could cross my name out in silence, then I could expose them in that very same silence. Not today, not tomorrow. But there would come a time when I would take back every penny and every inch of dignity they had trampled on. And when that moment came, they would not see Madison, the timid little sister, anymore. They would meet a woman who knew her worth and would never let anyone redefine it again. I stayed silent. No reaction. No message to Evan after reading the email with his name under the list of people who crossed me off the wedding. I just started preparing. Not because I wanted to destroy anyone, but because I refused to be treated like a decorative piece. Nice to have, but just as fine without. That night, I took off my watch, removed my earrings, let my hair down, and opened my laptop. The screen reflected my face darker, harder, no longer the Madison from 2 weeks ago. I opened every folder related to Evan and Clarissa's wedding. Room booking schedules, service lists, notes from the meetings with the head chef, all neatly stored in Monarch's internal event management software. I pulled out each note. Every request from the bride's side was clearly documented, even the most unreasonable ones replacing all the tablecloths simply because the original fabric doesn't look refined enough in wedding photos, canceling the appetizer because it looks too common. I downloaded them, compiled them into a separate file, a behavioral record, not to send to anyone now, just so I wouldn't forget how they treated my staff, how they treated me. The next day, I requested a private meeting with Anthony, the highest level operations manager at Monarch Summit. We sat in a small conference room on the 8th floor, door shut, curtains drawn. I placed a copy of the contract in front of him. I want to confirm that clause 12.3 is still valid. Correct. Anthony nodded, furrowing his brows. You want to cancel the wedding? Not yet. But I want to know, if the time comes, do I have the right? He looked at me, longer than usual. You do. If the client's behavior violates ethical principles or damages the brand's image. I nodded, offered no further explanation. Anthony didn't press further. He only added one quiet but sharp line. If you need me on your side, I will be. That same evening, I went to my mother's house. She lived in a small apartment in the suburbs, where Evan and I grew up. I didn't plan to tell her everything. I just wanted to see someone who still saw me as a daughter, not a service provider. Mom opened the door, smiling when she saw I had brought the cinnamon toast she loved. It's been a while since you dropped by. We sat by the window. I poured tea and forced a small smile. I just need to be around someone who doesn't judge me for not belonging to any class. Mom looked up. She didn't pry, didn't push for details. She only said one line, almost in a whisper. Madison, you built an entire empire with your own 2 hands. They may have money, but they don't have your grit. I leaned my head on her shoulder, and for the first time in days, I let myself cry, not because I was weak, but because I was, beginning to loosen the knot of resentment, bit by bit. When I left Mom's, I drove slowly through our old neighborhood, the elementary school, the park. The old bakery is now under new ownership. All of it was a part of me, the real Madison, not part of them. I stopped at the old intersection, at a red light. Through the window, a couple was taking wedding photos under the pine trees. The bride beamed. The groom looked at her as if no one else existed. I bit my lip, not out of envy, but because I knew that for some people, marriage isn't about love. It's a performance, a ticket to some exclusive club. And I was just the one invited in to set the table. But it wouldn't be long before they realized. The person they thought only knew how to fold napkins was actually the one holding the power to decide the entire event. I couldn't crash the wedding right away. I didn't want to become that out-of-control woman screaming in the reception hall or firing off angry emails in the middle of the night. I needed something more subtle, something that would make them understand I was no longer the decorative piece they could hide behind a wall of flowers. On Monday afternoon, I stopped by the HR department. I want to review the staff assignment list for June 22nd. For the wedding day, ma'am, no. For the wedding banquet service trial, That was the dress rehearsal for the main event. The kitchen would prepare the full menu, serving a complete full dress rehearsal for the bride's side. And it was also the perfect opportunity for me to create my first small tremor. I went back to my office, opened my laptop, and sent an internal notice to the whole team. Temporarily suspend all support for the wedding banquet rehearsal event on June 22nd due to incomplete service confidentiality agreements. Short. By the book. Based on the clause Florence had signed back in March. An hour later, Clarissa called Victoria. I knew because Victoria immediately called me back. Her voice urgent, Madison. The bride's side is furious. They say no one will be serving them at the demo. Florence is threatening to move everything to another resort. That's fine, I said evenly. I'll resend the contract, along with a clear note the event is not considered an official service unless a legal representative has confirmed the ethical conduct clause. Silence. Victoria got it instantly. She knew this was no longer Madison, the hotel owner. This was a woman who had just been erased from a family celebration, and now had picked up her pen to rewrite the script. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Evan. I didn't answer. He left a short voicemail. Clarissa says you're making things more difficult. Can we talk? There was no sis in that message, no apology, just a man trying to keep the perfect facade of the upcoming ceremony intact. That night, I sat alone in the hotel lobby. Outside, unseasonal snowflakes drifted down. A newlywed couple walked in, hand in hand. The bride leaned down to kiss her husband's cheek. He laughed softly, his gaze tender as if the whole world had narrowed down to just her. I watched them, not feeling sad, just let out a sigh. Marriage, when it's real, never needs exclusion. It doesn't require stepping on someone else to walk down the aisle. One day, one small step. I hadn't flipped the table yet. I had simply pulled my chair back and sat at the table they once pushed me away from. And if you've ever been shoved out of the very place you helped build, hit subscribe to Revenge Mark, because we don't need to scream to be heard. We just need to start walking back in our own way, tomorrow. I have a meeting with the sound equipment supplier. Clarissa wants the lighting changed to a golden amber tone to match her aura energy. But I'm thinking about a light strong enough to illuminate their true faces. Will they realize this game is starting to turn the next day? At 9:12 a.m. Florence Bennett walked into the main lobby of the Monarch Summit as if she owned the entire mountain range behind the hotel. She had no appointment. She didn't knock on the office door. She didn't greet the receptionist. She pushed open the conference room door where I was meeting with the head of the technical department about the stage lighting system. "Madison," she said, her voice cold and steady. "We need to talk. Right now." I closed my laptop, smiled faintly. "Please, have a seat." Florence didn't sit. She stood there like a silver spear, clutching her designer bag, her eyes sweeping the room as if assessing both the decor and the quality of the person inside. I've heard there have been some misunderstandings, unnecessary ones. You're making things more complicated than they need to be. I kept my composure. I'm only enforcing the very terms of the contract you yourself signed. Florence let out a soft laugh, the kind of laugh that carried the scent of mint and power. I'm the one paying the bill. "Madison, you need to remember that." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I'm the one who paid first. In cash, in time, and with my name etched into every single stone tile of this hotel's foundation. The air in the room thickened. Florence studied me for a few more seconds. Then she tilted her head, her voice dropping lower. I know your career is tied to the reputation of the monarch. And you know, rumors spread quickly in high society. If this place gets labeled as unprofessional or difficult to work with, who do you think will take the loss? That was no longer a veiled threat. That was a declaration of war. That same afternoon, I received a text from someone on the booking management team. Clarissa has requested to cancel all the lodging reservations made for the bride's side. They're moving to rent the resort across the street. I read the message, my hand stiffening. Clarissa wasn't sitting still. She was trying to push me into losing control, forcing me into financial strain and public embarrassment in front of my staff. That evening, when staff whispered among themselves about the bride's side moving to a different hotel, I only nodded. No rebuttal, no explanation. But I knew, as clearly as the moon shining over the mountain peak, this game was no longer one-sided. Around the same time, Victoria, the wedding planner, arranged to meet me privately at a cafe near the hotel. She sat down, exhaling a long sigh. Madison, I know you're a woman of your word, but I also know the bride's side is looking for a way to trap you into canceling the contract so they can get compensated. I nodded. I figured they're playing a double-layer move. Victoria looked at me seriously. They told me outright, if you don't back off, they'll file complaints with the State Tourism Board about the service, about your attitude, about anything they can come up with. I tightened my grip around my coffee cup. I wasn't surprised. I just felt cold, not from fear, but from the realization that I was stepping into an actual battle. This was no longer a small-scale pushback. This was a war of honor. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by my window, the city lights casting a faint glow across the curtains. I thought about everything I had built, every person I had helped, every sacrifice I had quietly endured. And now, they were trying to take it, not with guns or the law, but with prejudice, reputation, and lies. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. I wasn't born to wage war, but I was no longer the woman who bowed her head when mocked as just a hotel owner. If they wanted a fight, I wouldn't dodge. I would stand tall. And this time, I would not play by their rules. 3 days after Florence warned she would damage the reputation of the Monarch Summit, I received an email from the Colorado Wedding Review. Subject line reporter requests a private interview with Madison Cole, the woman behind the mountaintop weddings. I froze for a few seconds. I hadn't sent out any press releases. I hadn't hired PR. Then I noticed the small print below. We've heard you're currently handling one of the most challenging society weddings of the season. Several partners have praised your firmness and professionalism. We'd love to hear the story from the perspective of the woman behind the Monarch brand. This wasn't an invitation for an interview. It was the first signal from the outside world that people were starting to see me, apart from the shadow of the groom's sister. I replied, honored. But I would like my comments to focus on the value of respect in the service industry, rather than on personal matters or scandals. The interview took place on Friday afternoon. We talked about the journey of building Monarch, the philosophy that the host is the last one to leave, and how I train my staff to put human values before profit. I didn't mention Evan. Not one word about Clarissa. Only the quiet presence of the truth would those who were perceptive understand. A day later, the article went live. The headline caused a stir when the hotel owner refuses to bow the story of Madison Cole. Comments poured in. Some former guests shared their experiences at Monarch, mentioning how I personally stood outside to greet them in the snow back in 2021. Then someone wrote I used to work as a server for Madison. She treated me like family, never like a subordinate. That was the moment. I no longer felt like I was just reacting. I was leading. Clarissa reacted exactly as I had predicted. She sent an email to Victoria CCing me, saying I feel Madison's article is a sneaky, passive-aggressive attack. I suggest all future meetings be moved to a private platform, not using the hotel email. I didn't respond, but I did get a text from Evan. You're making everything more awkward. I typed a reply, then erased it. Typed again, then erased it. Finally, I wrote, if things are awkward only because the truth was spoken, then maybe we should reconsider who's really trying to build a wedding on a layer of gloss. He didn't reply. That afternoon, I walked past the conference room where they were preparing for the rehearsal. A new staff member approached me, Ms. Cole. I just wanted to say, the way you've handled everything is truly inspiring. I used to think a woman like me would never have a voice in this industry, but now I think differently. I looked at her. Her hands were still trembling. My eyes stung. Night fell. I returned to my office, looking out at the city lights through the window. I hadn't won. Not yet. But I knew, for the first time in months. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not afraid of being forgotten. Not afraid of being unseen. I was rewriting my own role in this story. But I also knew this clearly. Clarissa hadn't let go. Florence, even less so. The question now was no longer, do I dare to fight back? It was, do I have enough strength to withstand the next blow they're about to strike? I didn't know how Florence would react after the interview. I only knew. I had just touched something she couldn't control, the public. And a story without dialogue. She had written in advance. 2 quiet days. No calls. No emails from Victoria. No sign of Clarissa showing up in the hotel lobby. I thought they were retreating. But no. They were stepping back to gather momentum. 9:47 on Tuesday morning. Anthony walked into my office, his expression heavy. He placed a plain white envelope in front of me with no name on it. It came along with a gift basket, sent from Blake's Clarissa's father's wine distribution company. I opened the envelope. An internal complaint letter, written in extremely formal and cold language report concerning a senior management employee at Monarch Summit who has engaged in favoritism, abuse of authority, and conflict of interest by using a family event to promote her personal image. I read the lines over and over. My name was not mentioned directly, but the entire letter pointed the knife straight at me. I stepped out of my office. A few staff members avoided looking at my eyes. No more warm nods like every other day. No more good morning. Ms. Cole ringing out from the front desk. I felt I had just become a blind spot in my own hotel. Anthony found me at lunch. Quietly, I checked. Florence sent this complaint to the Colorado State Tourism and Hospitality Association. She said if Monarch doesn't temporarily suspend your authority over this wedding, she'll pull all their sponsorships from the network. I stayed silent. My chest felt unbearably heavy. That afternoon, Evan came to the hotel. For the first time since the day I was crossed off the guest list, he came to see me face to face. We met in a small conference room, soft yellow light spilling over the wooden table. He avoided my gaze. No hug. No apology. Madison, things are getting out of control. Clarissa and her mother are feeling attacked, and you think I'm the one attacking them. He hesitated. I just don't want my wedding day turning into a battlefield. I clenched my hands. My voice cracked into pieces, like glass hitting the floor. I stayed silent when they called me the hotel owner. I stepped back when they changed the menu, replaced all the tablecloths, and called my staff below standard, and I was taken off the guest list. But now, the moment I speak up for myself, suddenly I'm declaring war. Evan lowered his head, silent. Then he said something that hurt more than any accusation Florence could throw at me. I think maybe it's best if you keep your distance so things can calm down. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, the man who once said he would never abandon me, and realized I was truly alone. When he left, I stood in front of the mirror in the third-floor restroom. No makeup, eyes red and swollen, jacket crooked. No one would recognize. I was the one who had built this entire hotel from the ground up with my own 2 hands. An employee walked in, quickly avoiding my eyes. I sat down on the bench by the window, my back against the wall, knees pulled tight to my chest. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I wasn't just at risk of losing my reputation. I was starting to lose myself. And when the sound of my phone rang from my bag, a message from my lawyer with the subject line, "We need to talk. Something serious has come up," I knew. The wave had only just begun. I didn't know what to do after the message from my lawyer. All I could feel was my hands turning ice cold as I held the phone. The call came at 14:35. Florence is taking this case to the state level, my lawyer said, his tone cautious. She's hired a legal team to review the contract, accusing you of professional misconduct, conflict of interest, and engaging in unfair competition. You could be sued if you continue to interfere with the event. I swallowed hard. And if I step back, she could still release damaging information to hurt your reputation. But at least you wouldn't be caught in a legal dispute. I sat in silence for a few seconds. Thank you. I'll think about it. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't have the strength anymore. I just sat there staring out the window, where the snow had just begun to fall, light, thin, soundless. Just like the way I was falling apart quietly and without anyone knowing. That night, I stayed at the office. Everyone had gone home. It was just me and the steady clicking sound of the heating system. I opened my laptop. I reread the very first emails I had sent Evan about the wedding. Lines filled with so much hope. I'm so happy to be standing behind you on your big day. I've already put down a deposit for part of the cost. Consider it my wedding gift to my little brother. Looking back now, every word felt like a knife carving into my memory. I pulled up the internal security camera footage. I watched the clip of Evan coming to the hotel earlier today. The angle was low, but clear. He walked in like any other guest. Not a single glance my way. No one seemed to realize that man used to be my whole world when we were growing up, and I'm now just a shadow in his life. I walked down to the lobby. No purpose, just walking. I looked at everything around me, the brown leather chairs I had personally chosen, the handcrafted wine cabinet, the sheepskin rug from the Northern Valley. Every single thing was proof that I had lived, that I had loved, that I had poured my heart out to build Monarch. And now a group of people trying to turn me into a troublemaker, the jealous one, the useless extra in the very empire I had created. I stopped by the staff break room, saw a sticky note on the fridge, Ms. Cole, thank you for believing in me from the very beginning. If it weren't for you, I'd still be washing dishes on the night shift. I read it. My eyes blurred, but right then, a voice in my head spoke. And because you trust people too much, now you're standing here alone? I was afraid I had made a mistake. A mistake was not walking away sooner. A mistake in believing Evan would choose family. A mistake thinking I was strong enough to stand against a family with money, power, and a 3-page list of lawyers. I went back to my room close to 1:00 a.m., took off my shoes, collapsed into the chair. I looked into the mirror. Madison, the confident Madison, was gone. All I saw was a woman drained of energy, her eyes empty. I turned on the bedside lamp, then turned it off, turned it back on, then off again, as if I was choosing between staying and stepping away, between fighting on or quietly disappearing from this game. I used to think losing my brother was the worst thing, but it wasn't. The worst thing is losing faith in myself, and I'm not sure how much of that I have left. I fell asleep on the chair. No blanket, no dreams, just a heavy sleep, like a stone pressing down on my chest. When I opened my eyes, the early morning light streamed in through the curtains, dim, cold, but still light. I dragged myself into the kitchen. The water boiled, my hands trembling as I poured it into a cup. And then I saw a small note stuck to the fridge, handwritten, familiar handwriting. It was from Marcia, the night shift cleaning staff, who had been working at Monarch since the very first day I opened it. Madison, I know you're tired, but if you collapse, we won't have anyone to lean on. Don't let them take your light away. I placed my hand over the words. For a long time, my heart felt like someone had just gently placed a warm stone in the middle of my chest. At 9:15 a.m., I returned to the hotel. No makeup, no blazer dress, just jeans, a loose button-down shirt, my hair tied up high. I walked into the main kitchen. Anthony and a few staff members were busy prepping ingredients for the upcoming wedding banquet. The whole group froze when they saw me. I smiled for the first time in days. Who wants to try a new dessert I came up with at 3:00 a.m.? The room burst out laughing, light, genuine, as if Madison had returned, if only a little. I stayed with the kitchen crew all morning, slicing fruit, adjusting plating angles. I didn't talk about Evan. I didn't mention Florence. I just listened to the sound of knives chopping, the sizzle from the stove, and the laughter around me. Around noon, I was drying my hands when my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered cautiously. This is Madison Cole. On the other end, a woman's voice. Hello, I'm Grace Patterson. I work with the organization Women Who Build. We read your interview in the Colorado Review. Very impressive. I frowned slightly, still unsure of the purpose. We'd like to invite you to be a speaker at our seminar on the topic Owning Your Voice in a Male-Dominated Industry. We believe your story will empower many. I stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen. The scent of mint and custard still lingered in the air. And me, the woman who, just the night before, thought she had no value left, was now being asked to inspire others. I pressed my lips together. I'll do it. That evening, I stepped out into the back courtyard of the hotel. The wind was cold but gentle. The pine branches swayed as if they were saying something, and I remembered I had stood in this exact spot 5 winters ago when the bank was about to repossess my property because I was 2 months behind on my mortgage payments. I had thought I can't possibly survive this, but I did. I bent down, picked up a small stone from the ground, and held it tightly in my hand. I got through it once. I'll get through it again. If you're at rock bottom, where the only light comes from within, remember this. A small flame is still a flame, and even ashes can still keep someone warm. Don't miss this journey. Subscribe to Revenge Mark because you deserve to hear this. You have never been a loser. It's just that your turn to rise hasn't come yet. I started waking up earlier, not out of anxiety, but I needed a clear mind before stepping into the final stage. No more sleepless nights drifting in the conference room. No more checking emails every 10 minutes. I had hit rock bottom. I had sat there, unmoving. Now, I was getting back up, step by step. I reviewed the entire wedding contract file, every appendix. Every line is about brand reputation, partner ethics, and the right to cancel the event in case of harm to the property owner. I backed everything up onto 3 hard drives. One was sent to my lawyer. One left in Anthony's office. One was locked in a small safe in my private room. I left nothing that could be dismissed as emotional. Everything would be in the clauses, in the evidence, in the law. On June 16th, I sent an official document to Victoria, the wedding planner. The content was simple. I will need to participate in the final review of the event. In my capacity as the legal representative and owner of the venue, please provide a specific time. 10 minutes later, a reply from Victoria understood. The review will take place on the 18th at 14:00 in the Sapphire Room. No refusal. No one dared to object anymore. I was back at the table without knocking. I called a meeting with all the hotel's key personnel, standing before nearly 20 people. I said, I know there are a lot of rumors. I know some of you feel scared, feel awkward. I looked at every face. I can't promise this will be easy, but I promise anyone who stands on the side of kindness and fairness will never be left behind. No one clapped, but no one looked down. No one avoided my gaze anymore. That afternoon, I received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a printed copy of an internal email from Florence to Clarissa. The first line made my heart clench. I don't care if she's Evan's sister or the hotel owner. She's an obstacle. Below. There was even a direct quote if necessary. I'll make sure that girl goes bankrupt. Let's see who would dare hire her then. I wasn't surprised. I just felt cold. A cold no longer sharp, but clear, like a flat sheet of ice, colorless, without cracks. I folded the paper, placed it back in the envelope. Then, I locked it in the safe. Not to reveal. Not yet. But I needed to know I wasn't imagining it. They were truly willing to crush me if I refused to stay silent. That evening, I drove up the hill behind the hotel. No one came with me. I stood looking down at Monarch Summit from a distance. Lights spilled out from the lobby, the kitchen, the top floor meeting room. That was the light I used to keep. Now I would protect it. But not with trust anymore. With truth. With strategy. With preparation. 3 days left until the wedding. I was ready. Ready to let them see that the person they called the obstacle was the very one holding the keys to open or close the final door. 14:03 p.m. I stepped into the Sapphire Room, where the final review for the wedding would take place. Clarissa was already there. Florence stood beside her in a champagne-colored silk dress, her eyes sharp as blades. Evan stood slightly behind, hands in his pockets, avoiding my gaze. The air in the room was thick, like solidified honey. No one spoke. Only the sharp clack of Clarissa's high heels echoed, tapping across the wooden floor. I lifted my chin. "Shall we begin?" I asked, my voice steady, without the slightest tremor. Florence tilted her chin upward. "You can step outside if you think it's unnecessary. The technical team has already followed our requests." I looked her straight in the eye. I didn't come here to ask for permission to stand in my own space. Clarissa let out a short, sharp laugh. "Madison, this is a wedding, not a hearing. Relax." I stayed silent. Silence was no longer weakness. It was a choice. Victoria, the wedding planner, walked in right then, her eyes tense. "We need to finalize the order of the ceremony, the lighting effects, and the photo positions before 17:00 p.m. Ms. Cole, do you have any input?" I nodded. From my jacket pocket, I took out a white envelope. I handed it to Victoria. "This is an updated version of the venue usage terms, adjusted according to the original contract." Florence strode over and snatched it from her. "What is this a reminder?" I said calmly. "That excluding the venue owner from the event violates professional organizational principles and could lead to the cancellation of the contract right before the big day. In that case, the entire deposit will be non-refundable." Clarissa scoffed. "Are you threatening us?" "No," I replied. "I'm setting boundaries, and this time, I'm standing on my own side." Evan finally lifted his head. "Madison, does this really have to go that far?" I looked at him. For the first time, without pain, only clarity. "You once asked me why things became awkward. The answer lies in the fact that I was erased, labeled as staff, pushed out of the family picture, yet still expected to pay, smile, and stay quiet." He fell silent. Florence folded her arms. Clarissa turned away. I continued. "I will not cancel this wedding, but it will take place according to the agreed terms and principles. No one will call me an outsider while standing on the very wooden floor I personally laid down the first day we opened." The silence stretched. No one responded, but I knew the message had been delivered. Clear. Without shouting, as I turned and walked out of the room, I heard Florence whisper behind my back, "That girl is not the same anymore." No, I was no longer the same. 3 days until the wedding, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid for it to come. Wedding day. At 4:58 p.m., the guests were already seated. The sound of a violin drifted from the snow-dusted balcony. Golden afternoon light spilled across the wooden floor, reflecting in shimmering patterns as if nothing were out of place. Perfect. The hotel's facade was magnificent. Inside, Clarissa, in a pearl-embroidered white wedding gown, walked toward the end of the aisle. Evan's arm trembled slightly, I noticed, but he didn't look at me. I stood behind a frosted glass partition. No one could see me, but I could see everything. The ceremony unfolded on time. The pastor began to speak. Everything looked like a fairy tale, until the MC mentioned a detail in the introduction, something I had quietly adjusted the night before. And today, in the breathtaking setting of Monarch Summit, a place built by the very hands and heart of a woman the bride and groom once called family. The room froze for a moment. A few heads turned. Clarissa glanced at Evan. Florence tightened her grip on her purse. I stayed still. Thank you, Madison Cole, the founder and very soul of this place, for holding firm when others tried to make her disappear. A perfect turn of the spotlight. No one needed to shout. No wine needed to be spilled on a dress. All it took was the truth, spoken, at the right moment, in the right place, to the right ears. Clarissa still tried to keep her face composed, but I saw her lips press together. From the front row, Florence twisted in her seat, scanning the crowd for me. She didn't find me. I didn't need to appear. I was in every stone, every beam of light, every breath of this hotel. The reception after the ceremony was held in the ballroom on the ground floor. I walked in without an announcement. Simple black dress, hair neatly tied up. Every eye turned toward me, and no one dared look away. Florence approached, her face pale. You planned this all along. No, I smiled. I just protected what's mine. The ones who lose something are the ones who have to scheme. Clarissa stood behind her. Her face had gone pale, but she said nothing. Evan came closer. Our eyes met. No more anger, no more closeness. Just two people who once shared blood, now reduced to memories. You've changed, he said softly. No, you're mistaken. I've simply gone back to my true self, the one who endured far too long. I walked past them. No apology, no need for permission. I had won, but I had also lost. And I knew no victory is ever complete. There is only the freedom that comes when you no longer have to bow your head. In the soft music playing at the far end of the ballroom, I made my way to the balcony. Snow had begun to fall. Slow. Beautiful. Cold. I tilted my face toward the sky. My breath rose in small clouds. My heart no longer shattered. Only silence remained. Enough to hear my own heartbeat again. 3 days after the wedding, an article appeared in the Business and Society section of the Aspen Chronicle. Monarch Summit. A hotel empire led by a woman once pushed out of her own family's table. It came with a photo of me standing in front of the hotel entrance, with no glamorous dress or makeup, just me in an old business suit, my eyes looking straight into the camera. Florence submitted her resignation from the boards of 2 local arts organizations. Rumors spread. She had pressured to change the wedding program content, then faced strong backlash after a speech that mentioned Madison's name. Some sponsors quietly pulled their funding from Clarissa's family's liquor distribution company. Clarissa was still posting honeymoon pictures on social media, but the engagement had noticeably dropped. Every comment revolved around one question. Have you thanked the person who built that place, yet Evan stayed silent? No texts, no calls, no explanation. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to anymore. Some family ties don't collapse with a loud crash. They just quietly wither, like a flower no one bothers to water. I stood alone in the conference room, the place that was once our shared dream. I remembered the early days when Evan and I painted the walls, set up chairs, and built the wooden stage with our own hands. I remembered his eyes the day our mother died, red, aching, clinging to my hand like a child. It was all still there, in my memory, but it was no longer the present. I had won. I was still standing. I had reclaimed my voice, my name, my position. I had made those who underestimated me step back, be cautious, admit defeat. But victory did not bring laughter, only the stillness after the storm, heavy, empty, and cold. Marcia, the cleaning staff, knocked on my door late in the afternoon. "Are you not having dinner?" she asked. I shook my head. She placed a lunchbox and a folded piece of paper on my desk. After she left, I opened it. It held just one line. "You did what none of us dared to do. Stand up." "Thank you." I covered my face. For the first time in over a week, I cried, not because of the hurt, but because I remembered I used to be that kind of person, unafraid. And now, I was back. Revenge didn't make me a better person, but it made me see clearly who stayed by my side when I had nothing left to give. It stripped away all the pretense, allowing me to live honestly, even if it hurt. Outside, the snow was still falling, white to the point of blinding. I placed my hand against the glass. My hand was cold, but my heart, it was warm again. I knew life wouldn't stop here. There would be more losses, more betrayals, but I also knew never again would I be the one pushed out of my own table. There was one last thing, still unfinished, something I had to do to truly close this chapter, but would I have the courage? I will know tomorrow morning. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. No alarm, no one is calling, just my body knowing it was time. I brewed a cup of Earl Grey tea and stepped out onto the 6th floor balcony, the one that looked straight out to the snow-covered San Juan Mountains. No one stood beside me. No one needed to. I had grown used to being alone, and for the first time in many years, I didn't feel lonely. I sat down, took out a small piece of paper, didn't write anything elaborate, just a short note addressed to myself, the me from 1 year ago. "Madison, if you're reading this, it means you didn't disappear. You didn't let them silence your voice. You stood up and you lived true." I folded the paper, placed it in a small glass jar, and buried it under the pine tree at the far end of the balcony. No one needed to find it. I just needed to know it was there. Around 9:00, I drove up the rocky hill behind the hotel, the place where I once sat crying the first time I was cut off from a family dinner, the place where I swore I would never let myself be treated with disrespect again. Today, I came back not to be angry, but to let go. I took out a small box. Inside was my mother's necklace, the gift Evan once held for me but never gave. I opened the box. Instead of putting it around my neck, I let it fall into the thin stream that ran through the rocky gap. Cold water splashed lightly against my hand. It wasn't throwing it away. It was setting it free. I returned to the Monarch for the last time that day, stepped into the lobby, breathed in the scent of wood, the soft lavender fragrance lingering in the air. I put pen to paper and signed the power of attorney. Anthony, the one who had been by my side through this whole journey, would now run the hotel. "Are you ready?" I asked. He smiled. "If it weren't for you, I'd still be standing at the old place washing dishes." I gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Keep it the way we always dreamed, not perfect, but honest." I walked out the main doors, didn't look back, didn't bring a suitcase, just a small bag, enough for the road ahead. I didn't know where the future would take me. Maybe another small town, a roadside cafe, or a quiet farm in the wide-open lands of Colorado. I was no longer searching for anyone, no longer waiting for anyone to understand me, because now I understood myself. I was not the groom's sister, not the shadow behind the wedding, not the person crossed off the list. I was Madison Cole, a woman who had loved, had lost, had stood up and chosen not to seek revenge anymore, but to keep going, Revenge was never the ultimate goal. It was just the road that led to the crossroads of truth. And once you see clearly, you can choose to turn or to keep walking with a heart more whole than you ever thought possible. If you've ever been pushed out of the very banquet of life you helped create, remember you can build another table in a place where no one needs to invite you, because you are the reason it all begins. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Mark, because every wound deserves to be told with pride and with faith.